hours of sleep, I would not be as coherent. Next up, we have Chief Bob Chamberlin from the Quickwatooks Hooks Way Mees. Did I do that okay? I'm going to be practicing. I introduced Bob at very many rallies because he is so dedicated to protecting our wild salmon, and I always get it wrong.
Gilacas Lahamas to Localatse. Nuguam Owadi guys and Laka Quickwatooks for Fatmis. We get in Hukilakala Manwastam Patnala. Manwastam Genoka Kasloplatle. Lach Guktamas, the Quickwatooks for Fatmis, Mustama Dowdino. My traditional name is Owadi. I'm the elected chief of the Quickwatooks and the Fatmis First Nation. I've asked you all to hear my words that I speak today for the hearts and minds of our people of the Broughton Archipelago. I need to first acknowledge the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nation and the South Island Coast Salish for allowing us to do this important work on the territory. When I think of fish farms, it takes all the joy out of my heart. I think of all the devastation that's going on in the territories of our people. I think of the sacredness of salmon, the sacredness of the environment, and I think about how there are some shareholders in Norway laughing at our governments, laughing and counting their money, while our environment and your Department of Fisheries and Oceans allows this industry to continue as it has. And it's shameful, absolutely shameful. Where is it? And when is it that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the federal government, and the provincial government somehow conveniently forgot the value of wild salmon? I think of communities up and down the coast that made a very good living off the abundant wild salmon stocks. Whether it's Alert Bay, whether it's Bella Bella, whether it's Prince Rupert, you take your pick. There are many, many generations of people that have sustained their families and their communities from wild salmon. And now we have a government that's turned their backs. We have a government that is now embracing an industry that is easier to manage, which means that they can pretend and minimize the impacts that we are all watching in our territories. I would love to be able to set up a roadblock at every fish farms, but they're very isolated bays, and I'm really not sure if anyone would have really noticed if we did that in the first place. But what I'm here to say to you all is that we all need to continue this discussion. We need to think of the circles of influence that we each have within our families, within our communities, and of course with your MLAs and your MPs. Because it is only through action that we will ever affect change on government. When I think of the Canadian government and one of the things that they've accomplished in the last number of months, 6 months to a year, they've embraced the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Now they've done that on your behalf. Every one of you that's Canadian, you now support the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And there are a number of sections found within that declaration that describe the obligations that the government has to engaging and sharing decision-making on industry activities, safeguarding of traditional food sources, and environmental standards. Now this is what Canada is promising to the rest of the world. And I can tell you right now, there are 2 words that were missing from that statement of support. And those 2 words are, just kidding. Because they don't mean it. We've tried hard in a number of times to have Canada and British Columbia act in accordance with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People to find nothing. It's almost like the federal government has taken a page from Gordon Campbell's New Relationship and the approach of delay, deny, and distract, where you can talk about doing something, but talk minus action equals nothing. And it's time that we say that's enough. If you ever question the power of being a part of the public, I draw your attention to Fish Lake and our wonderful Marilyn Baptiste, the chief of Honeyguatine, and the incredible work that they've done. And what they said to the government is, our interests first. Your interest of exploiting our territories is unacceptable. And no, you don't have a checkbook big enough to pay off for our territories. And it is this type of action and response that we see from the federal government. And it is this very notion that we need to keep the momentum going. We need each of us to find a way, whether it's an email, whether it's a postcard. Send a postcard to your MLA and your MP, drop it in the mailbox, it's free. So get your message to them, do it in writing, and make sure that your elected officials understand how you feel. As we go into an election tomorrow, there are so many people that have a high level of apathy, thinking, well, my vote doesn't mean much. Well, it is up to each of us and our own personal responsibility to make it matter. We cannot be silent. We cannot look the other way and trust that the government is acting in their best interests. You don't have to do much research around the world to see the impacts of fish farms on wild salmon and other salmonoid species. It's known everywhere. And yet here we have a government that allows them in. We have a Department of Fisheries and Oceans that permits them to have the damages that they do. And now we're having times that we're hearing from the Cohen inquiry and some of the information that's leaking out of there. How about 30-odd pieces of information that describe known salmon disease on the farms that never were reported to you, never reported to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and it was kept quiet between the companies and DFO. Is that acceptable to you? I know it's not acceptable to me. And it's time that we look up and we stand up and we say with our loudest voices we can that it's time that the Canadian government had a public inquiry into this whole fiasco called fish farms. That we open this all up so all of you can understand what it is that those of us that fight this fight know. So you can embrace it and have it understood in a very broad way in this society. Because what we stand up for is the protection of the environment. What we're standing up for is the protection and sustainability of wild salmon, which is integral. It is integral to the watersheds and the wildlife that's found. I was at a potlatch in Alert Bay honoring Chief Pat Alfred, the late Chief Pat Alfred. And I was honored to watch a salmon transformation dance be brought out for our people. And to have it danced on the sacred floor of our Gupsi, of our big house. And to hear the story of where that mask and that dance came from. It is clearly tied to Tsakhane, which is our origin story of the Kwik-Wasuutnuk people. So if there's ever any question about our Aboriginal rights as it relates to salmon, I point to a story of our origin that puts us on this map called the world, and I know. And I know who we are, I know where we're from, and I know that salmon has been a very key part of who we are. And it is time that that gets respected in a broad and meaningful way from all levels of government. So in closing, I would like to thank each and every one of you that have taken time to be here today. It's a beautiful day. We could have found many reasons not to be here. And I want to thank every one of you for making the excuse to be here, to taking the time out of your life to come and stand up and say, wild salmon matter. And we need to continue that statement every chance we get. Whenever you read the rhetoric that comes from the fish farm industry, oh gosh, I always want to throw up when I see those commercials. But it's time that we say enough. It's time that we come together as peoples. If we are to turn our trust to non-governmental organizations or the departments or the provincial ministries to look after our interests, I tell you now that they will fail you. We will not be beholden to funding. When I see the good work that Alexandra Morton does, who in our community we've given a name, Kwayumzi, when I see the work that she does, and she's turned the back on the organized environmental groups because she wanted to do what was right. She wanted to continue to fight for what is the truth and not be restricted looking for other fundings. And I know now, I've had the greatest pleasure in my life to meet the many people that have come to walk with Alexandra Morton, to walk with Kwayumzi, and to stand up here and to say that what work she's doing matters. And the work that she's doing is for each and every one of us. And the work that she's doing is trying and working very hard and tirelessly to ensure that your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren have an opportunity to taste wild salmon. And that is something that we cannot lose sight of. I think it's important, as Grand Chief Stuart Phillip mentioned, that we have the entire executive of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs here today. Our organization has stood up every opportunity we've had to say that wild salmon first. Wild salmon first. I know Stuart's just quite happy that we're not doing another fast for 29 hours like we did during the Olympics. So I'd like to step back, but I'd like to have us all join in unison for something. And I saw this at a rally in Vancouver, and I was quite taken with the man that did it. So I'm going to yell wild, and you're going to say salmon. Ready? Wild! 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 Okay, I say fish farms, you say sucks. Fish farms! Fish farms! Fish farms! Fish farms! Very appreciated.
Next up, there is a woman who Bob just gave all the introduction I think she needs. So, Alex.